So, oh wait, is it okay? Because right now, it's really windy outside. Let me see if I can. I don't know if I can change my. I might have to. It's really annoying because I can try and change my audio settings. Okay, if no one's gonna complain about it, I'm gonna continue. Okay. So last week we learned HTML. So this week we'll be learning how to style websites using basic CSS. So what is CSS? We're gonna have a visual example. So this is an example of no CSS. So look, it looks terrible, right? It looks like it's from like the 90s or something. Here's an example of Google without any CSS. Look how disorganized it is. Here's another example. And here are examples with CSS. So look how nice this website looks. Has like a really nice background, you know, like images, buttons, everything's laid out very nice. Here's another example. And another one. So what is CSS? CSS just makes stuff look good. It makes your websites look really nice. So how do you use CSS? Well, technically there's 3 ways of adding CSS. There's inline CSS, internal or embedded CSS, and external CSS. Generally speaking, each like type has its advantages and disadvantages, but we'll be covering external because when you look at most websites that have really fancy designs, they use external CSS. So referring back to the index HTML that we worked on last week, I don't know if you guys follow along and also made your website, but to add or to link a CSS file, you need to use the link tab. Then you need to reference the CSS file. So in this case, it'd be the name of the CSS file, .css. So if it's called pretty, you would write pretty.css. In this case, it's called style.css. And then you need to use the rel, what's it called, tag, or because this tells the HTML file that you're referencing a style sheet. So if you don't put this in, your CSS file won't work. And then finally, type dot, you make it equal to text.css. This is optional because if you put in rel equals style sheet, HTML will automatically assume that you're referencing a text/CSS. So maybe take a moment to add that. And I'll continue on. So once you add that to your index HTML file, you want to create your CSS file. I think it automatically creates it when you do a HTML, CSS, JavaScript REPL. But if it doesn't, you want to add the file and add style.css or whatever you want to name your CSS file. So what if we want to what if we wanted to use CSS to make the header bigger? So this would be the header right here, the title of my website. And we'll get into the very basics. So first we need to talk about selectors, which basically designates specific elements within our HTML and targets them to apply styles. So you can change the color, size, position, and you can target specific HTML elements or tags like P, which is a paragraph, and header 1 or H1. And the general format is the name of the tag you want to target, whether it be link, P, H1, open brackets, and then you would put your CSS in here, and we'll get into what we put in between those brackets, and then close it with the curly brackets. So next we have properties. So within a selector, there are properties we can use to style our elements. This could be background, color, font size, height, etc. There's a lot of properties that you can change. Generally speaking, they're either one word, and if they're two words, they're usually connected by dash. So here are some examples. We have font size, colon, dot, 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 and then semicolon, and we'll get into what goes here on the next slide. And then here's another example. So we can assign values, which are just basically that determine the behavior we want to assign to that property. So the general format is the property name, colon, the value you want to assign, semicolon. So we have an example here, font size, colon, we do 12 pixels, which is the font size we want, and then we close it off with a semicolon. And notice how every property and value is on a different line. So we have a new line for each one. And then we have color, colon, green, and then semicolon, and then we have another line. I'm pretty sure if you write it all in one line, you need to have that semicolon to separate them. Okay, so quick recap. You have the tag or the element, the selector, open curly bracket. Then you have the property, which in this case is color, colon, and then the value you want to assign to it. So in this case, we're assigning the color green, and then we close it off with a semicolon. And then to close off the entire selector, we close it off with a curly bracket. Oh, there's a very nice animations here. I forgot. Again, selector, property, and value. So with our knowledge about selecting headings and changing the font size, we can edit or change the header of the website. So if you guys have your own website that you made from last week, maybe you can try adding CSS and changing it. Actually, just for a show of hands, how many of you guys were following along and have a website? Like just type in chat yes or react. Okay, so do you guys want 1 second to try and change the, okay. What is a website? Can we put this on? Yeah, you can make your website into your resume to showcase your projects. So do you guys want a minute just to change the heading? If not, I can just go to the next slide and show you how it's done. Yeah, your website doesn't need to have Albert's head. All right, I'll give you guys a minute. So we'll continue on in 3:17. You could put the Albert face on, but you could be copyright struck by Albert because it's his image. Wait, Albert, you have to copyright the image. Well, I mean, like, privacy rules, right? Like, you don't have, it's his face, so you don't have his permission to use it. Then you better copyright your face. Okay. So it's been about a minute, and I'll just go to the next slide because we have an example of changing the font size. So again, we have the selector, and then we have the open and close curly brackets. We have the property, and in this case, we change it to 70 pixels. So that makes the font bigger. Again, you can make it as big as you want. You can try 1,000 pixels. That would be really big. It might take up like the entire website screen. So now that we know how to just generally write tags and select specific properties and assign values, let's go into more specific things we can do with CSS. So we can change the colors. And as the title says, colors is written the American way. Generally speaking, everything in CSS is written the American way. So remember not to use U, it's just ORS. And color is used to change aspects of the text. I think that's pretty straightforward. And there's 3 ways to change the color. You can use the name, you can use the RGB values, or you can use the hex code. Generally speaking, for name colors, CSS, there's like a huge list of colors you can use. It's not only just red, blue, yellow. There's like goldenrod, fire brick, light pink. So I don't know if we have a link, but if you guys want it, maybe later we could share like a website list of all the CSS colors that you can use. I think RGB is pretty straightforward. You individually sign the R, G, and B values, and then hex code is, well, hex code. Yeah, you can use RGB and hex code. Like you can use all 3 of them. They all work. So as a next challenge, change the color of each of these like texts. So the title, the about me, and the intro line, and try and use the different ways to assign colors. And remember the property tag or the property for this is color with OR, not OUR, because it's American. You can get custom colors. It's really nice because using RGB values in hex code gives you a lot of flexibility because you can color your website anything basically. And if you don't really like colors, you can always use the names because there's a huge list. And some of the colors are really pretty. And then some of them are not as pretty, like fuchsia, very bright, eye bleeding. Okay, I think I'm gonna continue on so that we can color draw. Oh my God, guys. So here's a example of the colors, what you can do with colors. So we have the color dot dot, and we have red, where we just literally write red, and we see that it changes the title. We use RGB here. So in this case, I just changed the green value. And then for the hex code, I just changed the blue value. Wow, this is very pretty. Oh, and again, we can select different tags. We can just separate them like this. So here I'm selecting the header 2, and here I'm selecting the P tag. And actually, you might have noticed here, I forgot the semicolon. Don't be like me, remember the semicolon. Okay, next are background colors. So basically they fill a space behind a given section. So it's kind of like highlighting it. And the same rules apply. You can use the name, you can use the RGB value, you can use a hex code. And it's just that the property is called background color, background dash color. So next we're going to be talking about text. So you might have noticed that your website is a really lame font. So we can actually change the font. And this is the font family property, and different computers allow different fonts to be used. Some may work and some might. Yeah, Helvetica, woo. So in this case, I've changed it to Helvetica, font family Helvetica. And then we see that the font is different. You could use Comic Sans if you want. I think commonly people import fonts from Google Fonts. So they have an API where you can just import the fonts. Can someone share that website in chat? So fonts.google.com, or you guys can, it's pretty short URL, you guys can put it in. And the nice thing about Google Fonts is that it generates CSS for different font families. So in this case, I chose this font, which is called Antonio. very nice font, and it generates a link tag, which you will put in your HTML file, and then it gives you the specific CSS rules to put into your CSS file. Thank you, Ryan. And here's just a visual example. So I've copy pasted the HTML link tabs in. And then in the CSS file, under the tag I want to change, I just add the Antonio sans serif under the font family property. So what happens if the font you want to use becomes unavailable? CSS lets you list multiple fonts separated by a comma, and it will just default to the next font in the list. So if Helvetica doesn't work, it'll go to Times New Roman, and then if there's any, keep on going until, if none of them work, it'll just do the default font that you see. Note for fonts that are more than one word, you have to surround them by quotations. So Times New Roman is 3 words, so you have to put quotations around them. So next we'll be talking about font size and font weight. So size just changes the size of the font, and weight alters the boldness of the font. So you can make it bolder or lighter, which is on a scale of 100 to 900 if you want to be specific. So in this case, we've made the font weight the lowest. So you notice how it's a lot thinner compared to that, right? And we made the font size, we haven't really changed the font size because it's still the same as the last one. So again, you can change this to 100, 1,000, 5. Next, we have font size and font decoration. So style will make it italicized, and decoration could be underlines, strike-throughs, which creates a line. So we have text decoration, and in this case, we want to underline it. And then we notice how it's underlined now here. And then for this one, we use this line through. And then it makes a strike through your text. And there's a lot more CSS properties that you can change. You can align the text, the center, left, right, or justified. You can transform the text to uppercase or lowercase. You can change the letter spacing. You can even add shadow to the text. And then we have a link here if someone would be kind enough to put that into the chat, which lists all the properties for text that you can change. So now let's take 5 minutes, and you guys can mess around with the text properties that we talked about. And then we'll continue on. If you guys want me to go back to another slide, just tell me and I can show you the properties. While we're here. Here's that website for CSS text properties. So you guys can go through that if you want to look at like alignment, decoration, transformation, and etc. I don't know, guys. You can maybe make it look better than what we're doing here because it doesn't look really nice. It's like neon yellow and red. You can maybe use like some of the hex codes and like generate a really nice color palette. How to make wirehacks.ca. I think that's a little more complicated than using basic CSS. Okay. So I'm going to move on just for time's sakes. So you guys can always refer back to the slides and add on whatever text decorations you want to. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you have multiple of the same tag, for example, in this case, we have 2 p tags. What if we want them to be different, or we want to have want them to have different styles? That's where we talk about advanced selectors. So there's 3 types of selectors. There's a tag/HTML selector, which is what we just discussed about selecting the p tag. There's class selectors and then ID selectors. So again, tag/HTML selectors are what we've been doing so far. They just target the HTML elements, like in this case, the p element, and we can change the font size and the color. So then we have class selectors, but first we need to talk about what a class is. And it's time to go back to HTML to talk about classes. So we can specify each element in HTML with a class attribute. It's kind of like a label, and we can use different classes to differentiate between different elements. So going back to your HTML file, for the p tags, in between the, what are these called? The arrows. You can assign a class attribute. So class equals, and then in quotations, the name of the class. So in this case, it's title. And then for these ones, I don't know why these two are the same. Oh yeah, because these are lyrics. So title and then lyrics. Triangle bracket. Yeah, okay, triangle brackets. And you put it, first of all, in the first like p tag, not the end. So here. And then don't forget the equal sign. So for class selectors, we can target specific classes, and the format is really important. You have to put a period right before the class name. And we'll show further examples of this, but just remember the period, class name, and then just assigning, you have to assign the open curly bracket and the closed curly bracket, and then you put your properties and values as you usually would with the class selectors or with the HTML selectors. So here's another example. We have class description and we have class hobbies, which will target this p tag and this p tag for hobbies. And then within our CSS file, we do dot, the class name in this case is description, and then we put our specific properties that we want to change for this tag. And we do the same thing for hobbies. And you notice, because we've done this, they're different. So in this case, we have Times New Roman, and this is Times New Roman. For this one, we're using Arial, so it's Arial. And then for this one, we've underlined it, so it's underlined. Next, we have ID selectors, and they're similar to a class, but only one can be used for HTML element. For example, your health card, credit card, passport. I don't think you should put that information on your website, but they're all unique to you. That's the point. So we have ID first, ID second, ID third. So this is the first line, the second line, and third line, and they're all unique to those elements. Yeah, don't put your, yeah, it's like unique to you, but like don't put any like personal information on your websites that's easy to access. Okay. And for the same thing, the ID selectors in your CSS file, you need to put something right before it. In this case, it's the hashtag or pawn sign or whatever you want to call it, hashtag, and then your ID attributes. So in this case, it's the name of your ID. So going back to this slide, it would be hashtag first, hashtag second, hashtag third. Again, format is important. So here's a visual example. We have the list. We're targeting the list element. We're giving it the ID coding in the HTML file. And then in the CSS file, we do hashtag coding, and then we just change what we want to change. So in this case, I made it purple, made it uppercase, and made the font a little bigger. And notice how it doesn't affect any of these other list elements. So how about you guys take I think 5 minutes is too much, maybe like 2 minutes and try to implement some classes and some IDs into your HTML file and style them in your CSS file. Oh, Zhao's question, we'll be answering that in like very shortly in the next few slides. But what Ryan has said is right. Yeah, it's so pretty. The example side, look, there's Albert's beautiful face, this beautiful Arial, like different fonts. There's a page too, like, whoo. Oh, I can't take credit for this. This is all Albert's doing. He supplied the HTML for us to fancify. Shh, don't reveal that. Yeah, who's Amy? Okay, it's been like 2 minutes, so I'm gonna move on. Yeah, the colors are breathtaking. Look at this very nice purple and blue. Like it's like cool colors, like color palette. Okay, so just one last thing. We didn't really actually define CSS. At the beginning, we just said it's making stuff look good. So we're actually going to define CSS. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So a cascade is, the definition for a cascade is a small waterfall, typically one of several that follows in stages of the steep rocky slope. So in CSS, all styles cascade from the top style to the bottom of the sheet. So styles that
Wait,
are added
won't the
can be
water ruin the
overwritten.
computer? Won't the water from the cascade ruin the computer?
Pardon?
You said cascade's a waterfall, so won't it like ruin the computer?
I mean, yeah, you don't want to put water in your computer, I guess. But in this case, we're meaning that styles at the top can be overridden at the bottom. So for in this example, we have two p tags that we're selecting. Generally speaking, you won't have this happen, but in this case, just as an example, we'll notice that this p tag that comes second, because it's at the bottom, it takes precedent and it overrides the p tag at the beginning. And here is proof that that works because it's brown and it's in Arial. So this takes precedence. Another thing we need to talk about is CSS specificity. There's actually an order of priority for selectors. If you're comparing the same selector type, then the cascade will apply as usual. Otherwise, as Zhao was asking, the priority for the selectors go like this. So ID is the most specific or takes the most precedence. Then it's class, and then it's the tag / HTML. So here's a visual example. We have the ID hashtag coding or the ID coding, and then we have just a regular HTML tag. And notice how, although we're both targeting this, it doesn't override. So this is still purple. Like everything else is still like changed, but the thing with the ID tag is not overridden. So it's still uppercase and it's still purple. Whereas these ones that don't have the ID, they take on the color Firebrick. So thanks to CSS, the website looks amazing now. Wow, look, there's like color, there's like weight, there's decoration.
Why is the about me crossed out?
Oh, well, it's a stylistic choice, you know, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If you guys think it's ugly, you don't have to add it. You have so much freedom with this.
I didn't say that though.
So we have more resources here for the CSS, CSS tricks. These are all just great resources to learn CSS. And we also, another nice thing about the internet is that there's a lot of CSS games you can play online. So we have CSS Diner and Pixelactly, and you can use it to test your CSS skills. Can you guys like share this in chat? Maybe these two, because I think when you play games, yeah, it is a little fast actually. I thought like 60 slides would take much longer.